Hey YouTube, I'm Kenneth Ryan.
Linz Resop.
And we're back with another exciting episode of Fanfiction Friday. This week we are doing a little ficlet thing. It's called Kinky Avengers by
CrunchySalad.
Yeah, and the summary is it's a collection of short fills written for Avenger Kink. The first chapter is table count, whatever, that doesn't matter. Okay, so basically it's just a bunch of little Avengers theme
with a couple rare pairs in there.
Yeah. So I guess we're just gonna kind of go into it, and the very first one is Clint Coulson phone sex. Everyone knows that Clint and Phil are together, and it's a given that Barton's the flirty, dirty one, right? That's what everyone believes until they overhear Phil and Clint's conversations over the not really private comm they think is on, and are speechless to realize that, damn, Phil Coulson, S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Avengers Super Natty, can speak dirty. Really hot and dirty. Cue everyone not being able to experience debriefing the same way again.
Fun. So they think they're on like a secret comm, but they're really on like a public
They're like
comm.
publicly broadcasting it to the whole like facility. Oof. Alright, well, I guess here we go.
Okay.
Tony pushed his foot off the leg of his table, sending his chair rolling from one part of the lab to another. He had a flame torch in his hands. His badass motherfucking inventor mix was blasting in his ears, and he had just finished off a good old-fashioned New York pizza. Life is good. The only thing that could make the night better was, well, sex. He could use some sex. Pepper was in Tokyo. Rodney was in Washington. Rhodey was in Washington. He wondered if he could convince Rhodey to fly over while he finished making this new part for his suit. Do you want me to tell?
You can. I don't.
Cool.
Sure, you can.
Jarvis, he said, even as he turned on the torch. Turn off the music and call Rhodey.
Yes, sir. A few moments later, the buzz of static filled the air, followed by Rhodey's smooth, vaguely annoyed voice. I don't do British accents, so I'm not going to bother with Jarvis's.
Okay,
yeah.
You can definitely do Rhodey too, because I'm sure it's going to be a Rhodey Stark conversation.
I don't know what he sounds. What?
Whatever you want. I don't sound like Robert Downey Jr.
Is there something I can help you with, Tony?
Oh, you know, I'm just sitting here alone in my lab, thinking about you and getting all hot and bothered, wondering if my big, cuddly Papa Bear wanted to come over and get some honey. There was a short pause before Rhodey answered. If anything, he sounded more annoyed than before.
Tony, I'm not going to drop everything I'm doing to fly over just because you want to get laid.
Oh, come on. You wouldn't be getting
you wouldn't
be getting as much out of it as me. You know Bruce is living with me now, right? What if I head over to his room and try to get a little something going on?
You wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. Not without Pepper's permission. But Rhodey didn't need to know that. Before Tony could proclaim that yes, actually, he would, and Rhodey should know that about him by now, a third voice buzzed over the intercom.
Oh. I'm flattered, Tony, but right now I only see you as a friend. Both Tony and Rhodey paused for a few moments before Tony got over the mild shock that someone was listening to them. Friends can have sex, Tony said. And how'd you get on this line? I thought I told Jarvis to call Rhodey.
It seems, Jarvis interrupted, that when S.H.I.E.L.D. installed their communication lines in the building, they did something to interfere with all the existing lines.
Of course, Tony said. Tony couldn't say he was surprised. I knew I should have had them supervised, but you'd think a big outfit like S.H.I.E.L.D. would be able to install some phone or satellite or whatever lines without fucking things up. Anyone else out there listening to me strike out with both Rodney and Rhodey? Fucking fuck. Rhodey and Bruce. Maybe someone I might have better luck with.
Don't even bother trying, but I'm here, came Natasha's voice. This conversation has been very amusing.
I didn't mean to eavesdrop, Steve said, but your voices just came on and off, and the off switch doesn't seem to be working. Tony grunted a little noise.
So it's really going to be broadcasted through all the rooms.
Yeah, well, what do you expect from government work? That's what happens when S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't act with Stark Industries for all their technological needs. I don't suppose S.H.I.E.L.D.'s line reaches Asgard, Bruce wondered out loud. There was a buzzing over the intercom again, and Tony's ears perked up in anticipation of Thor's booming voice. Instead, Clint's voice came through the air.
Near you.
Near you.
I was wondering when you would call. His voice was low and sultry, and the first thing Tony thought was, great, he's talking to Coulson. The last thing he needed to hear was Clint flirting and talking dirty to bland, straight-laced Coulson. Tony liked both of them. He did. But what a guy like Clint saw in a guy like Coulson, he didn't really know. Unless it was that whole opposites attract kind of thing.
This
is Coulson.
Of course I did.
I call.
Did you find the gift that I left in your bag before you left on your mission?
You mean the dildo? Fuck yeah. Are you gonna help me use it now? Okay. Maybe Coulson wasn't as planned and straight-laced as Tony thought, but they can't turn it off, remember?
Oh, that's true.
If he was stuffing surprise dildos in his boyfriend's bag, would Rhodey enjoy surprise dildos in his overnight bags? Tony imagined him pulling something like a triple ripple butt plug out of his duffel bag in front of all his military friends. No, Rhodey would definitely not enjoy that.
It depends on how good you've been. Have you been a good boy, Clint? There was a little bit of a growl to Coulson's usually monotonous voice. Tony kind of liked it. He noticed that none of the other Avengers and Rhodey were speaking up and making their presence known, so what was the harm in listening in?
You know I haven't, Phil. What are you going to do about it? Coulson chuckled.
Oh, I can think of a few things once you come home. But for now, why don't you take off your pants and tell me exactly how hard you are? Tony was surprised to note that they didn't beat around the bush at all. Even when he had phone sex with someone, there was a certain amount of, honey, how was your day, before they got to the good stuff. There was a rustling of zipper and fabric.
Oh, you can't even imagine how hard I am, just from hearing your voice.
I think I can give it a shot. I bet you're rock hard and flushed red, pre-cum leaking out of that gorgeous mushroom head of yours. Have I told you lately how much I love your cock, Clint?
Oh my god. Yeah, but tell me some more.
Best. I could spend hours sucking your dick, tracing my tongue over every vein and ridge, seeing what noises I could get you to make with just my mouth alone.
Oh god, Clint said before his voice faded in indiscernible moaning. Oh god. I'm touching myself to your voice, Phil.
Such an unsexy name, Phil. Noises just like those. Are you touching yourself?
No.
Are you touching yourself while imagining me sucking on you?
You know it. That's exactly what I'm doing. It was what Tony was doing, too. The entertainment was too good to waste, and he had already taken his cock out to casually stroke as he imagined Clint doing the same. He tried to imagine what Clint would look like. Maybe reclining in bed, a headset perched on his ear, one hand stroking himself while the other played with his balls. He liked to think that Clint was long and thick, a size more substantial than his small, compact frame would make people think. But then, Tony always was a size queen.
Are you fingering yourself, Clint?
No, not yet.
Do it for me. Slide your fingers into that tight little hole.
Dirty talk is so
I want
weird.
to hear you working yourself open. Fucking yourself. Getting yourself ready for that huge dildo to split you in half. Oh. Tony closed his eyes and bit his lip, not wanting to make any noises too loud to give himself away. Although, with Clint's assortment of moans and other noises, he wasn't sure if he needed to worry too much. Does that feel good? Coulson asked, voice as calm as ever. How does that feel?
How good does that feel?
How good does that feel?
So good. I could finger myself forever.
Oh, I don't think you mean that. Not when you have something better than just fingers to occupy your hole with. Is that dildo ready? There was a pause. Maybe a bit of scrambling as Clint went to grab the dildo. Tony wondered if he was lubing it up or if he had already done all that prep before even calling Coulson. God, he wished this were a video feed.
I've got it, Phil. Fuck, it's big.
Suck it first. Get it nice and wet so it doesn't tear you apart. There were slurping. Oh, it's like the grapefruiting video. I imagine that's what's playing.
Mm-hmm.
There were slurping noises. Gagging sounds that went straight to Tony's groin. Tony imagined that Clint was still fingering himself as he sucked on the dildo, filled on both ends.
Oh, God, Phil, can I put it in? I just want to shove it in already. Yeah. It was a long, long moment that convinced Tony that Coulson was very much a sadist, and then...
Go ahead.
No, I got feminine. Tony got very feminine at the end there. Tony tried to imagine Clint. I mean, it was kind of feminine in the beginning. Anyways, Clint with his legs spread, with his cheeks spread, tried to imagine it as inch after inch of a huge dildo slid into Clint's small, puckered hole, stretching it open. It's all the way in. Clint panted the words more than he said them, and he couldn't have sounded more content. It feels so good. I feel so full.
Pretend it's my dick inside of you. Fucking you. Does it feel good when I fuck you?
Always, Clint moaned.
I'm going to fuck you harder. So hard it almost hurts. Touch yourself while I do it, Clint. Jerk yourself off while I'm inside you. Tony fumbled at his own cock as he listened to the noises Clint was making. As he listened to Clint murmuring dirty little encouragements to him, it was better than porn to know that it was actually happening at that moment between two people he actually knew. Tony wasn't even close, though, when his two friends started to reach their little ending.
Oh, fuck. Phil, I'm coming. Clint's orgasm came in long, shuddering breaths and little sounds that weren't quite moans, and Tony imagined him spilling himself in long, white arches onto his stomach. The line went very noticeably fuzzy before silence reigned for several long moments. They don't just say bye, they just hang up. When Tony thought the coast was clear, he decided to test the waters.
Hello? He asked. You guys still there? I don't think debriefings will ever be the same, Bruce said, sounding just a little traumatized. And I'm a little worried about Steve. Steve? No answer.
I'll check on him, Natasha said. He's probably in shock.
Or masturbating. Tony quite liked the idea of Captain America jerking off. It had been a go-to fantasy, after all, when he was just a kid.
How early did you start jacking off? Dang.
Guy can't be as straight-laced as we all think, after all. Coulson wasn't. Rhodey cleared his throat.
You know what, Tony? I think I'll head over to your place after all.
Good to know, Tony said, smiling as he shut off the communication line.
Fun.
So this is your...
That was number one, and that's like half of all these. So that was the longest ficlet of the 5?
Yeah, there's 5. All right, on to ficlet number 2.
Chapter 3. Rhodey/Steve. Tony can't handle it. Tony introduces Steve and Rhodey at one of his parties. Parentheses, Vets Day maybe, sometime they can be in uniform. Rhodey is a patriotic drunk, so the more he drinks, the more attracted he is to Steve. He starts hitting on him aggressively. Maybe they even sneak off somewhere, and Tony can't handle it. Whether Tony is/was with one of them is up to the author, but no infidelity, please. Humor or drama, I don't care, I just want Tony's head exploding while his buddies are going at it, or getting off on it, whichever.
Oh, I guess these are the prompts that the author's been given.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here you go.
You want me to start, or you?
Yeah.
Okay. Despite popular opinion, Tony Stark was perfectly capable of throwing a grown-up party. He attended enough of them to see how they were done, after all, and he always was a quick study. Not all of his parties ended with drunk celebrities breaking into neighbors' houses. The conversion of hotel suites into strip clubs, or 2 grown men in metal suits of weaponized armor fighting each other. That's Iron Man 2, I think. So he was not at all surprised when his latest shindig, a mostly government affair at the Huntley, designed to get him a big, fat energy contract, was going smashingly. It helped that a few of his other Avengers were here. There was still a lot of goodwill over the whole saving the world thing, and all the guests were clamoring to meet the heroes of the day. Natasha was in a fabulous gown and entertaining a group of politicians, and Tony wasn't sure if he should be surprised to see her being charming and cracking jokes. Fury was completely in his element, probably used to dealing with government and military types as director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Okay.
Steve was sitting at one of the impeccably appointed tables, smiling as Rhodey's arm draped over his shoulder and Rhodey's hand fell onto his knee. ... Whoa, what? Tony walked over to where his two friends, both looking sharp in their varying versions of dress blues, were sitting entirely too close for his liking.
This is drunk Rhodey.
Is this Rhodey?
Oh, absolutely.
Has anyone ever told you how you look wearing that red, white, and blue? The costume of yours.
Rhodey, snuggle bunny. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Tony reached down and tugged his friend to his feet. He gave a quick smile to a confused and blinking Steve, mumbled an "excuse us for a bit," and pulled Rhodey into a corner. He pulled Rhodey so close to him that they were nearly chest to chest, then started to straighten the already straight array of pins and medals on Rhodey's uniform as an excuse for their proximity. "You're drunk." When Rhodey was drunk, he got
Loquacious?
loquacious? I don't know what that means.
I think
And
that's
affectionate.
talkative, kind of.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what that word means.
And affectionate. And patriotic. Which made Steve, who basically oozed America from his pores, a rather obvious target for his attention.
Was born on the 4th of July. Why, yes, Rhodey said. Yes, I am, Tony. Thank you for noticing. And I was just having a very interesting conversation with Steve Rogers, so...
Yeah, about that. Tony glanced to his side to see Steve still sitting at the table and staring at them with some mixture of confusion and concern. "Please tell me you weren't hitting on Steve."
That's exactly what I was doing. And he was completely into it, so if you let me go, I have a living legend to seduce.
"Come on, Gobstopper," Tony said before cringing. Not the best nickname he had ever used, but he thought them up on the fly. Not all of them were going to be gems. At any rate, Tony put on his best puppy dog face, all big eyes and pouty lips. "You're my best friend / ex-boyfriend. He's my new teammate / long-lost brother. Or at least it feels that way considering how Dad was always talking about him like he was his favorite son. This is just too fucking weird for me."
Tony! Rhodey's face went serious as one hand grabbed Tony's shoulder and the other gently cut the side of Tony's face. "I like this guy. Pretty sure he likes me too. So I'm gonna give you the same courtesy that you give me every time I tell you not to hook up with someone you shouldn't be hooking up with." That just meant Rhodey was going to ignore him. Tony decided to try a different appeal.
"A drunken hookup? Don't you think he deserves better? Guy's probably still a virgin." Rhodey laughed and patted Tony's face.
Oh man, from the stories he's told me, definitely not as innocent as you all seem to think. Tony could only frown as Rhodey turned and left. And that frown only grew when he saw Steve beam and smile as Rhodey reclaimed the seat beside him. He never should have introduced them. Should have known they would get along. Stupid military men. I'm reading ahead a little,
this
blah,
is just
blah,
a person?
blah. It's Pepper.
This is Pepper?
Yep.
Well, you should be Pepper then if she's going to talk to...
Why is she calling him Stark? Oh wait, no, this is someone else. This is a shareholder.
Okay, well you should still probably be Pepper. So
Stark, there you are!
Oh.
I was looking everywhere
It's
for
green,
you.
it's green!
I was looking everywhere for you. Tony turned to see a shareholder he would usually brush off instantly, only they needed to be on good terms right now. After a little small talk, he found himself in conversation with yet another person, then another, and by the time he had a chance to look for Rhodey and Steve again, they were gone. Tony's head whipped around as he scanned the too large room. But to no avail. He avoided a senator, a lawyer, and 2 models as he made his way out to the room, only to run into Pepper.
"Pepper!" He grabbed her in a hug before letting her go. "It's so perfect that you're here. You can help me find Rhodey and Steve." Pepper frowned and tilted her head in the way that she did when she had no idea what he was going on about.
Why do you need to find Rhodey and Steve?
"Because they're sneaking off to do unspeakable things to each other, and I have to stop them before it happens." Tony wished that Pepper would just get on board and help without the tedious explanations. I mean, come on. Rhodey and Captain America. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Rhodes and Cap. Can you believe this? Pepper sighed before placing a hand on his shoulder and squeezing.
I know it's hard to see your exes with someone else, but don't you think you're overreacting? Rhodey has dated lots of other people after you, and you've never cared.
But this is Steve. Steve's my dad's favorite. Steve, my fellow Avenger, who I am finally on good terms with. With my Rhodey. It's weird. How come no one can see how weird it is? Now Pepper was checking her cell phone, which was not a good sign. It meant she had already decided to brush him off.
You know what I think? I think you should stop obsessing over those two before your girlfriend starts to get jealous.
What are you talking about, Pep? You're my... Oh.
You're my... No.
Tony tried for a sheepish expression as he tried to gauge how annoyed or angry Pepper was. Not very, he decided, or it wouldn't hurt to say something nice. Well, you're not the jealous type, especially since you know how much I love you and how you make me a better person, and did I say how much I love you?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you mind moving so I can go do my job? Pepper waved herself onto the side, waited for Tony to step away, and then disappeared into the party. So, help from Pepper was out of the question. Tony made his way to the front desk, where fame, charm, and a few $100 bills got him a room number and key card. It was nice to be him, or so he thought, until he actually opened the door.
Is this Tony?
Yep.
What the hell? Tony didn't know what he had been expecting. He didn't think they had been gone all that long and assumed that they would still be flirting or making out. He did not expect to see Steve on all fours on the bed, moaning like a $10 whore with Rhodey's face buried between his ass cheeks.
Fun.
Rhodey jumped away. Steve scrambled off and behind the bed, peeking over the tops so that only a tuft of golden hair and bright blue eyes were visible.
Tony! Rhodey stomped over, pushed Tony out in the hallway, and closed the door behind them. What the hell is wrong with you? And for once, Tony's mind wasn't supplying him with all the pretty words it usually did. Rhodey softened his tone of voice. Tony, what is this all actually about? Tony crossed his arms, uncrossed them, kicked his feet a little. Finally.
I don't know. Maybe it's about how the guy I grew up hearing about all the time didn't really give a shit about me when we first met, but he likes you instantly. Or maybe it's about how Dad and everyone else thinks he's so damn perfect, but he's not, and I thought you'd be able to see through that. Or maybe... And here, Tony's voice went a little bit softer. Maybe it's the fact that you're my best friend. You're the best man I know. And if you start dating someone even half as good as you are, you won't have any time left. You won't have any time for me anymore.
Okay.
Rhodey took a long, audible breath before grabbing Tony and pulling him into his arms.
Oh, Tony, you know that's not gonna happen.
Do I? Tony mumbled into Rhodey's shoulder.
Tony, I love you, but you're an asshole. If I were gonna drop you, I'd have done it a long time ago. Sorry, but you're stuck with me. Tony laughed as his arms tugged tight around Rhodey's back.
I'm going to make you put that in writing.
Sure thing, Tony. Rhodey pulled away then, giving Tony a playful punch on the shoulder. As long as you leave, like right now, because I've got better things to do than dealing with your issues. Tony smiled and held his hands up.
Leaving. He turned and headed back to the elevator, figuring it wouldn't be such a horrible thing if Rhodey and Steve started dating after all.
Less porn in that one. So, that's the end of it,
That
by
is
the
the end of
way.
it. Yeah, now we're on to the next ficlet. Chapter 4. Bucky, Steve, Tony takes them to a gay bar. I see we're seeing all these through Tony's eyes.
Why are they all so Tony? Well, I mean, this one might be Bucky-centric,
Alright,
actually.
So, summary.
Yeah, this is more Bucky-centric.
Bucky-
Tony's there.
Bucky wakes up in the future. The whole Winter Soldier thing didn't happen. He was frozen and S.H.I.E.L.D. found him, where homosexuality is way more common and widely accepted. He spent his entire life back in the 20s through 40s trying to deny
That's a
his
long
feelings for
time that he
men
was
and
not
Steve.
alive.
And now that he doesn't have to, he finds that he still can't accept himself because of deep-seated fear. I'd like to see Tony figure it out and take Bucky and Steve to a gay club to prove to Bucky that homosexuality isn't condemned in the way it was back then, and also to prove that Steve is comfortable with it and totally into Bucky. Also, maybe Tony could help things along by macking on either Steve or Bucky to make the other one jealous.
Maybe not. Not a great idea, but also, who cares?
Alright. They didn't call them gay bars in his time. When he was a kid, there was talk of certain notorious
Am I going to be
speakeasies
Bucky since you're both Tony and
Yeah.
Steve? Okay.
with names like Gladys Bentley whispered in trendy circus freak show acts, but that was before his time. By the time he was grown enough to realize where his preferences lied, excuse me, no one really called them anything. They were just places that were open to that kind of thing. If you knew where you were, which Bucky never did, because as far as he was concerned, those places and those people didn't concern him. And now here he was, 70 years later, sitting at a table in a bar that flew a rainbow flag out front. Men gyrated together on the dance floor in front of him.
Throwing these two into like a gay club seems like a terrible idea.
Right?
And maybe take him to like some sort of meeting.
Look, man.
But also that'd probably be the bad side of the gays.
Yeah.
Like support, because they would be like, oh, all these shitty things happen.
Yeah.
Pride? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Well, Pride is like this.
But a little more public, so a little less grinding.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
More topless women painted rainbow or something, I don't know.
Fast, repetitive beats played too loudly on the speakers. He assumed the noise was supposed to be music. "Did you see the paparazzi outside?" Tony asked. Stark was sitting two bodies down, Steve being the body in between them. He was also dressed in a tight tank top and ridiculous leather pants. "They couldn't care less that I was going into a gay club. All they wanted to do was take my picture and try to find out what celebrities I might be shacking up with at the moment."
Is this Bucky? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I get it. People can be more open about these kinds of things these days. That didn't stop him from maybe sitting too straight in his seat, gripping his bottle of beer too hard, wanting to get the hell out of here. Great, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. There was a disappointed look on Tony's face, and a vaguely hurt one on Steve's, and Bucky swallowed and wished he hadn't said that. Tony stared at him for a very long time. Then Tony sidled up close to Steve in a way that made Bucky very uncomfortable, and maybe just a little bit angry. Tangled his arm around Steve's arm and pushed his mouth close to Steve's ear. "Let's dance," Tony said, voice low and eyes playful, and Bucky knew flirting when he saw it. "I don't know, Tony." But Steve was already letting Tony pull him out onto the dance floor, and then they weren't so much dancing as they were fucking with their clothes on. Bucky felt sick. He pushed out of his seat and walked as fast as he could away from all this ridiculousness. Once he got outside, he froze, because there was a police officer walking by. But the man only spared him half a glance before moving on. Still, it took a few moments before his heart stopped trying to beat out of his chest, before Bucky could breathe normally again and set out on his way. He was 2 blocks away when he heard his name being called out, and what could he do but stop? It was Steve, after all, and he wasn't going to ignore Steve. So he stopped, turned around, and watched as Steve ran the rest of the way to catch up with him. And then they were standing there on some random street corner, Bucky waiting for Steve to say something, and Steve very obviously at a loss for words. They stood there in silence as Bucky wished he were a better man, wished he could tell Steve exactly what he thought of him, ever since they were 16 and Steve became the only good thing he had in his life. "You know," Steve said, "we could kiss right here, right now, and no one around us would care." The first response in Bucky's head was, "I'm not a faggot." It was the automatic response, the one that came from a lifetime of hiding and denial. He had no idea how Steve could stand there and say something so bold like it was nothing. But then, Steve always was the braver one between the two of them. And Steve always had a way of making him brave, too. Bucky leaned forward and tilted his head upward. It wasn't anything more than a peck, really, but when he drew away, Steve looked so damned happy he couldn't have even regret what he had just done. "Let's go home," he said, and Steve just nodded and fell into step beside him. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Omake. It's just like a short little epilogue thing. Oh, okay. Well... Tony's cell phone vibrated in a specific way as to herald the arrival of a new text message. He took it out, slid his thumb across the screen, and smiled at the message Steve sent him. He knew everything would work out for those two crazy kids, and to think that Steve had doubted him, he sent a "You're welcome" back, and slid the phone back into his too tight pants, just in time for a warm body to slide into the seat next to him. "You know," said a low, teasing voice, "I got a demotion because of you." Tony looked over. Young guy, mid to late 20s, hot. I'm sure I don't know. Wait, Galaga guy? This is the pairing I wanted to read this fic for, because I saw it in the tags. Who's Galaga guy? In the Avengers, he's on the deck where Fury stands, and he's like, "That guy is playing Galaga. He didn't think we would notice, but we did." Oh. So he's just a random character playing Galaga. Amazing. He got a demotion because of you. Galaga guy smirked. Oh wait, that's you should be, shouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Gallica Guy smirked. Tony let his eyes trail over a lithe-toned body that was encased in clothes that felt like a second skin. But damn, Gallica Guy was looking good. Well, Tony said, bringing out his most seductive smile, you'll just have to let me do everything in my power to make it up to you. What's the
That's
next
the end of that
one?
Oh my god. Steve is Tony's penis. Summary, Steve is Tony's sentient penis. Tony gives his penis some lovin'.
Oh my god. Let's pretend that Tony was still in college when he was 18 for the purposes of this fic. Or not if you're into underage, or if you're from a country where 16 or 17 isn't considered underage. Here you go.
What if Howard found Steve when Tony was college age, but through some scientific experiment gone wrong, ended up transferring Steve's consciousness to Tony's penis? Oh, God.
Here we go.
Oh, God.
Here we go.
Tony stared at the image on his computer screen and scrolled. To anyone outside his field, the diagram would have made little sense. A mumble jumble of squares and long rectangles of green, blue, purple, and orange, all connecting in a rather strange, messy way. On this level, it would be hard for lay people to recognize, like layman's terms, I guess.
I think so.
Lay people to recognize the diagram as a computer chip. Not that any of that really mattered. The more pressing concern was that Tony couldn't get the damn thing to work. He'd been spending nearly all his time in this MIT computer lab lately, staying up almost all night making changes and running simulations, and still couldn't get it to do what he wanted. And this was probably the 5th day in a row where he had gotten no more than 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night. He just wanted to finish this project. Tony sighed and stretched. A half-eaten box of pizza sat on the table beside him, along with a half-full 2-liter bottle of soda. He wondered if Rhodey was going to bring more coffee soon. He figured that he might as well take a restroom break while he was waiting, but it was only a few minutes later when he was pissing in the stall that Tony realized something was amiss. Steve was being awfully quiet. In fact, he'd been getting quieter and quieter over the last few days. Tony waited until he was done pissing to look down. He never watched, really. It was just too weird to, and shook his penis a few times.
Steve? He asked. Big blue eyes on the head of Tony's cock slowly blinked open.
I feel like I've read this before.
Steve's eyes.
Why do I feel like I've read this before?
There was a little mouth underneath the 2 eyes, and it opened as well. What do you want, Tony? Steve's voice was pretty listless. It didn't escape Tony's notice that he looked very, very pale. There was even a blue tinge to his cheeks.
What cheeks does he have?
Oh God, Tony realized. He had been completely neglecting Steve over the last several days. When was the last time he even masturbated? They both had needs. Steve even more so than him, since Steve was actually, well, a penis. I'm so sorry, Steve, Tony said. He cradled Steve's head in the palm of his hand. I completely forgot about your knees. No. Steve's voice was a loud command that startled Tony a bit, but then it went back to a soft, dull tone. I'm fine. You have your project to finish. That's more important. Tony raised an eyebrow. This wouldn't be the first time they'd argued about Tony's priorities, but Steve looked worse than Tony had ever seen him. Steve, you really need this. It's not going to kill me to go without. How do you know it won't? I mean, you're a penis.
So...
Tony couldn't believe he had to get permission to jerk himself off, especially when Steve obviously needed it so much. Different rules apply to you now.
I don't think that's how penises work, honestly. Don't have much experience, obviously, but I don't think that's how penises work.
It's not.
It's gonna die and fall off if you don't use it.
Steve narrowed his eyes in his determined face, an expression that always made Tony want to say, "Aw, how cute," and poke him in the cheek. I can make the sacrifice, Steve said. Are you kidding? Tony asked. You would risk your health so I don't have to spare a few minutes to jerk off? Hell, we probably wasted just as much time arguing about it as we would have actually doing it. Steve's resulting frown actually looked more like a pout. Fine, but be quick about it. Sure thing, Cap. Tony leaned back against the stall door as he took Steve in a firmer grip, careful to avoid poking the eyes and mouth. Steve had told him it wasn't painful or anything when Tony touched them, but Tony wanted to be careful.
It's creepy as hell.
And started to stroke. The change was ridiculously fast. Steve shuddered as his eyes closed and his mouth fell into an open O, hardening quickly under Tony's touch. What was it like, Tony wondered, when your whole body was an erogenous zone? They both had to bite their lips from making noises as Tony jerked Steve, and himself, off in the stall. Steve was fully hard now and flushed a pleasant shade of pink that Tony's cock had never turned before on its own. It was so much more fun masturbating now than it had been before. Tony knew all the intricacies of his own cock, and could use them to make Steve moan in ways Tony liked to think Captain America would never have moaned before. And he was putting all that knowledge to use right now. He kept his grip a little too tight and his movements a little too harsh. And Steve was feeling it, was shaking as he bit back moans and grunts, turning pinker and pinker as Tony's hand tugged at him. Tony wished they were back at his place. Somewhere there was more room to try more adventurous things. His experiments with Steve fellatio, and yoga classes were paying off. And if he bent the right way, he could just about lick at the tip of Steve's head. It drove Steve crazy, too, made him scream like nothing else before. He shot all over Tony's mouth and face. Oh God, just thinking about it had Tony close to the edge. Rub my head some more, Steve said, and he sounded close. So close. This is fucking weird.
It is, yeah.
Tony kept his hand focused on Steve's head, rubbing in tight, almost circular motions.
Kind of makes you think of the Star Kid musical Me and My Dick on YouTube.
Yeah, actually, yes.
But also they're like human-sized because they're played by people.
Well, right.
They're not. God. Yeah.
He thought about the things he wanted to try with Steve and hadn't had the chance to yet. How would Steve respond to having a cock ring tied around him? Would sounding make Steve groan in pleasure or whimper in pleasure pain? Imagining these things drove Tony over the edge, and he leaned forward and pointed Steve at the toilet as he nut. When they were done, he watched as Steve slowly went limp again, shrinking down in Tony's hand, a content expression on his face. Thanks, Tony, Steve said. No problem, Cap. If you ever feel like you need it, you should just tell me. I'm never too busy for you.
Tony, you in the bathroom? Both Tony and Steve froze at the sound of Rhodey's voice. Rhodey knocked on the stall. Tony, Rhodey asked, who are you talking to in there? Tony looked down at Steve, whose impossibly big eyes made him look horrified that they'd been caught.
No one? A very long pause, and then...
Were you talking to your penis? Steve glared at Tony as though it were his fault they were in this position, but Tony only shrugged. Finally, Rhodey sighed. Whatever, man, Rhodey said. I've got coffee for when you come out. And please don't bother telling me what they were doing in there. What? Whatever. Tony listened as Rhodey's footsteps carried him out and the door shut behind him. He couldn't help but laugh a little, despite the fact that Steve did not look amused. Perhaps especially because Steve did not look amused.
Oops. Just tell me if you need it, Tony repeated, before tucking Steve back into his boxers. He zipped his pants and made his way out, feeling a little bit more refreshed and ready to take on his project.
Wild.
Alright, well this is another, I guess, Steve Tony, so if you want to start it, because who knows if you'll get lines.
Yeah, okay. But it's called couples counseling, so I'm assuming there's a counselor, so I'll be able to do that.
Okay.
Steve Tony couples counseling. Steve and Tony fight constantly. They can hardly work together in the field, and after a major screw-up that leaves one of the team injured, Fury forces them into couples counseling. Humor, angst, crack, whatever, can take place in any verse. I admit I have a fondness for the ultimates. As long as it's Tony and Steve sitting on a couch at the therapist, human, mutant, shield lackey, whatever, talking about their feelings. Notes, Ultimate Marvel Universe is written a while ago, but I forgot to post it until now.
Okay.
Refer. Nicholas Fury. The therapist smiled. She didn't know who Nicholas Fury was exactly, had never met the man, but so far his referrals had helped keep her 2 kids in private school. She really should send the man a fruit basket. She leaned over her desk and pressed the intercom button. Send my next 2 patients in, please. Her eyes scanned over the rest of the file, which was rather sparse, save for the 2 names. And no, that couldn't be the Tony Stark, could it? She had to resist the urge to smile as the notorious Anthony Stark walked into the room, along with a strapping blonde man who was very obviously Steve Rogers. Well, she thought, she probably wouldn't have to worry about her kids' college funds either. She stood up to shake their hands. Hello, Tony, Steve, my name's Nina. I hope you don't mind being on a first-name basis from the get-go. I feel that it helps the sessions along.
Oh no, darling, Tony said, just smile. His smile just as charming as in the papers. I quite prefer it. It's a pleasure to meet you, Steve said. She directed them to sit down on the couch, and she took a chair directly in front of them.
So, what brings you 2 here today? The file said couples counseling, but it was always better to let the clients approach the topic on their own terms. She watched as Steve visibly tensed, the set of his jaws and shoulders going stiff.
We were forced to come, Steve said. Tony was more gracious. A colleague of ours highly recommended it. I think it's a marvelous idea, really. So many of my relationships have ended because of a lack of communication. Like one time, my fiancée neglected to tell me she was actually a spy sent to kill me. I put that put a rather serious damper on our romance. Nina jotted down, uses dry humor to deal with extraordinary circumstances in her notebook.
So, do you feel the need to be here?
Not at all, Steve said. Whatever issues we have, we can work through them ourselves. Tony humphed at that. Yes, because we've been doing an absolutely stupendous job of that so far. Steve narrowed his eyes at Tony, but didn't say anything. Interesting, Nina thought.
Steve, do you have any idea why Tony feels that you might need this? Steve shrugged. Tony smiled.
My dear, you will get nothing from him. He's from an era of stolid, stubborn men. He's positively affronted by the idea of talking with a head shrinker, as he would call them.
I see. Nina could see Steve's nostrils flare a little as he turned to glare at Tony.
Fine, Steve said. If you want to air out our dirty laundry, how about this? You had an affair with Thor. Wow. Nina was not expecting such a revelation so soon. Steve obviously had more issues than his stern exterior hinted at. To help her surprise, Tony just shrugged.
To her surprise.
Oh, please. We've both had affairs with Thor, and at least
Nice.
Mine was when you were away. Tony turned back to Nina then, his tone turning half conspiratorial and half accusing. Once he ran off without even telling me. I understood, of course, but we had just been through some horrid events. A teenager died because of me. I thought he had gone through some religious retreat. You know what he was really doing? Living in the desert, where he ran into a group of ravers and spent all his time dancing to dubstep. Dubstep!
Dubstep.
Tony's eyes widened as his hands clenched into fists. I fucking hate dubstep. You're the one always saying that I should open myself up to the modern world. I said that to get you out of going to church, Tony snapped, before turning once again to Nina. And meanwhile, I was dying from brain cancer and being taken captive by a man with the sanity of Gary Busey on a bender and the intelligence of me on a good day. That's a generous assessment of yourself, Steve muttered under his breath, which, my dear, is not an enticing combination of qualities in an enemy. Steve spoke up more loudly this time, and now that Tony was done talking, I didn't know your cancer was back. I thought it had gone. And yet you did know that you were facing a horrendous threat, and you still couldn't bring yourself to come back. Both men crossed their arms over their chests and looked away. Nina wrote down, vacation home in Tuscany in her notebook and underlined it twice.
I think, she said, we should schedule weekly sessions for both of you individually and together as a couple until we get this sorted out. Yes, Nick Fury was definitely getting a fruit basket. You go, girl. Get yourself that vacation home.
Kinky Avengers.
Kinky Avengers.
That was...
Only a few of them were kind of kinky.
Oh yeah, only a few of them were kinky. That last one was funny. That one was just like, this is just a hoot.
You were dancing to dubstep while I had brain cancer, and I'm assuming...
Vacation home in Tuscany. All
I'm
right.
assuming those are things that actually happened in the Ultimate Avengers
Oh, probably.
comics, probably.
Oh, probably.
So many things have happened to those characters throughout the course of
60 years. Some of them have been around forever.
But yeah, those are fun.
Well, that was the little ficlets that fell under the header of Kinky Avengers.
By Crunchy
By CrunchySalad. Oh my god. That was a good time. I enjoyed those. They're all just nice little, like, hee-hee, these are fun little
The phone
stories.
sex one was kind of interesting. Dirty talk is so weird to me, honestly.
Dirty talk is wacky. Dirty talk is so insane.
Like that one time we were on, like, Omegle or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I hate Omegle, but also it's such a hoot to be on that. The tangents.
Other time who said, like, something attractive and I don't know about a cat, and then you're like, he's like, pet her? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Just friends.
Yeah.
It was like, okay.
Hey.
Anyway, so we got a little off topic at the end there.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. This was a good week. I enjoyed this one. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to give the video a like and leave a comment down below.
So we can read more like it.
And especially if you've got fics that you want us to read.
Right, Fics. And tell us to read them.
You had best leave a nice comment down below. And yeah, do all the
Please
YouTube
comment.
things. Stay awesome. Read more smut. And until next week, bye-bye.